Over the years, the narrative of Julian Lennon was presented in parts and pieces, with snippets of sadness, rage, and love here and there, but never the whole truth. At the age of 62, he made the decision to shatter the stillness, leaving no space for uncertainty or rejection. His confession was profound, surprising, and admirable. Avoid paying attention to. Rather than being angry, it was spoken honestly, without filter. Julian finally opened up about how he felt about the woman who had a life-altering impact on him. Everyone was shocked by what he said. "I despised her to the core. John Lennon abandoned Julian and his mother Cynthia when Julian was a little boy, so that he and Yoko Ono could live their lives apart. A tragedy that Julian has never fully recovered from." Julian was profoundly touched by this news, which shook Beatles fans. The band and the headlines were of little concern to him. The fact that his father had left him devastated him. Just when Julian needed a parent's love, direction, and support the most, they were taken away. As a child, the writer experienced a lot of loss, uncertainty, and unresolved issues due to his parents' divorce. Julian saw things differently, despite the fact that many people admired John Lennon for his calm demeanor and moving music. He viewed John Lennon as a father figure who forsook his family and failed to be present for his son as he was growing up, offering neither advice or solace. The breakup of the Beatles or the public's fixation on celebrity rumors were not Julian's main points of discussion. His father's decision to abandon him, on the other hand, caused him pain. A permanent emotional scar was left behind by this pain, and it has never really healed. Looking back, Julian failed to understand how a parent could leave their child. His identity and the person he became were both shaped by this unanswered question. His mother, Cynthia, was left to handle the fallout. By taking on the dual roles of mother and guardian, she spared her son the anguish of abandonment. Not having much money and not living the lavish lifestyle that one would anticipate from the family of a famous artist made life challenging for them. To make her son feel safe and secure, Cynthia did all in her power. For Julian's basic needs, food, clothing, and an education, she even sacrificed cherished family heirlooms. The love she had for him gave him strength. The foundation for his future was built by her sacrifices. The world Julian encountered was hostile and challenging. He faced much greater difficulties while he was a student. As the son of John Lennon, he was believed by some of his classmates to lead a lavish lifestyle, which caused them to envy him. But it wasn't even close to the truth, and their assumptions made Julian suffer horribly. Because some people saw potential in him, they bullied him, taunted him, and even assaulted him physically. All he had was a well-known name, which was not enough to provide him the solace they had hoped for. Throughout these years, Julian worked on building his inner strength. He had the insight that things may appear one way, yet be very different from the truth at a very young age. Although many aspire to it, fame and fortune do not necessarily guarantee contentment and safety. The glitz and glamour of famous life was nothing to Julian, and acknowledged the deep-seated emotions of loneliness and grief. Julian had a different view of John Lennon than the general population, who saw him as a symbol of love and peace. There was a mismatch between his idealized parent figure and the peaceful desolation he felt at home. His sentiments and thoughts toward his father were colored by his childhood sense of injustice as he grew older. He saw more than just activists, legends, and great musicians. On the contrary, he witnessed a father who revealed a new side to his son after leaving his first family. This became a major part of Julian's life story and the source of his constant internal battle. John and Julian's relationship remained strained throughout Julian's adolescence. They avoided each other after the divorce and had awkward encounters when they did reconnect. Even when they did meet each other or speak on the phone, it never felt real. As if Julian didn't feel ignored enough, John was preoccupied with his relationship with Yoko Ono and their son, Sean. From a distance, he watched as his father embraced the role of a nurturing dad to Sean. Many found it touching that John had given up his job to devote himself to his younger son's upbringing. But it was a source of suffering for Julian. He had never felt his father's love like that before. There was no mistaking the unfair treatment of Sean and Julian. It exacerbated their already troubled relationship. Later on, Julian was always forthright about the disparity. He brought up his father's hypocritical public persona, in his opinion. Even though John Lennon told the world to be peaceful, love one another, and unite, he left his first wife and child to fend for themselves, in his view. It was impossible to ignore the huge gap between John's words and his actions. An insult that Julian believed his father had said has remained etched in his memory. According to his father, Julian was born of an intoxicated mistake, but Sean was born of love. Regardless of how true the comment was, it had a profound effect on Julian. Julian was reminded of how unloved he often felt by the words, which indicated a split between them. Some joy could be found even among the sorrow. May Pang encouraged John to spend time with Julian in the 1970s, when he was on a break from Yoko. They were able to form a strong bond over this time. John presented Julian with a drum machine and guitar as presents. But the most valuable thing was the quality of their time spent together. As they sat and talked and listened to music, Julian felt the love and support of a father figure for the first time. The recollections held great significance for him. Although they were fleeting, they were significant. Despite their physical separation, they demonstrated John's concern. But after John returned to Yoko, they stopped talking. There was stillness between them once more. Optimism began to take root when Julian was about 15 years old. On rare occasions, John would provide a call from the Big Apple. Just like starting over was a new song he played during one of his calls. On the phone with Julian, the upbeat melody and joyful tone of his father's voice were contagious to Julian. There was a fleeting impression that things could be looking up for them in terms of their relationship. But Julian's hope was fragile, and it was taken from him at the last minute. John Lennon was brutally and senselessly murdered in December 1980. Everyone throughout the world was saddened by the news of the legendary campaigner and musician's passing. That fateful night, when Julian's father passed away, a chilling event occurred on the evening of December 8, 1980, that altered the course of history. John Lennon's life tragically ended in New York City, outside of a serene Manhattan building. He had signed an album for a young man who had approached him outside his house earlier that day. Nobody foresaw the horrific manner in which Mark David Chapman would end his life. John returned home after a long day of recording songs. Chapman, who had been patiently waiting, pulled out a handgun and shot him 4 times in the back as soon as he stepped out of his car. One of the most gifted musicians was put to rest by this terrible deed. Just 10 minutes after that, at Roosevelt Hospital, John Lennon was declared dead. The news shocked people all over the globe as it spread rapidly. The following day, fans were still reeling over the execution of such a well-known and adored musician so close to his house. There was a mass of people outside, and they were all quietly crying. The decision to forego a funeral was made public by John's widow, Yoko Ono. To pay tribute to John, she instead asked that people keep spreading the word about his never-ending search for peace. Julian Lennon, a little boy from North Wales, was as shocked and saddened as everyone else by the passing of a renowned person. Julian Lennon is John Lennon's eldest son. Compared to the millions of followers in sorrow, his pain was subtler, but no less profound. After a long day at boarding school, Julian was glad to be back home with his mother Cynthia in the sleepy little town of Ruthin. He couldn't wait to see his dad again. His voice was kind and full of life when John called him from New York a few days ago. A new track from John's album Double Fantasy, Just Like Starting Over, was played during the call. Julian beamed as he expressed to his father his deep affection for the music. It was a unique opportunity for Julian to feel connected. His father's joy and vitality were palpable to him. They had hope again after all these years. They had faith that the distance and silence that had built up over the years could fade away. The possibility of a father-son reunion filled them with hope. The chimney in Julian's room collapsed one night, jolting him awake, not from a ringing phone, but from his slumber in the attic chamber of their Castle Street house. As masonry fragments plummet into the eerie blackness, this sudden development appeared to represent a sea change in his life. He felt as though his whole world was collapsing around him. Not long after that, he learned that his dad had vanished. When John last spoke to Julian, he was brimming with enthusiasm as he discussed music, fresh starts, and life in general. However, that voice will never be heard again. Their chats stick out in Julian's mind. Not only were they the last ones, but they also hinted at a future that never came to pass. An alternative version of their relationship, one where they laughed it off, made up, and healed past scars, will always intrigue him. That dream will never come true, alas. A father's love for his son that remains unfulfilled, together with John's music and legacy, are all that remain. Yoko and Sean, John's younger son who had spent his final years with him, became the center of attention as mourners gathered around him. Sean had the honor of being greeted by his father each morning, witnessing his love and happiness directly. On the other hand, Julian had to deal with the cold reality of his father's death on top of distant recollections and fleeting phone conversations. Julian felt a new type of grief following the catastrophe. The reading of John's will revealed an unpleasant truth. Yoko was bestowed complete authority, with a fortune of more than 200 million. A sum of £100,000 was left to Julian in a trust rather than as a direct bequest. This seemed nothing in comparison to the enormous fortune that the Beatles' songs, John Lennon's solo work, and continuing royalties had amassed. The money wasn't the only thing that made Julian angry. Which one was the worst? Did not receive any mention from his father in the will. The anguish he felt as a child was intensified when he watched his possessions being inherited by others while he himself had virtually little. Money wasn't the issue. It came down to a sense of belonging and being acknowledged as the kid of his father. The gap between his life and Sean's widened over time. While Julian hoped for John's abundant love for Sean in his latter years, Sean really got it. As executor of John's estate, Yoko ensured that Julian could not get his hands on any of his possessions. As time went on, Julian began to feel increasingly alone. A decision he made towards the end of his childhood will shape his adult life significantly. It was Julian's decision to resist and defend his legitimate inheritance. A battle that lasted nearly 2 decades began when he filed a lawsuit against the estate. It was a long and arduous voyage. It was common for others to misunderstand his motivations. Some thought he was merely trying to inherit his father's fortune. However, financial gain wasn't his only motive. Reclaiming a piece of his history was Julian's goal. He yearned for his father's cherished mementos, including letters, instruments, and personal effects. No matter how rocky their relationship had been, these were symbols of their bond. A lot of anxiety and time passed throughout the negotiations. Even though he was emotionally exhausted by the battle, he persisted because he wanted to carry on his father's work. Midway through the 1990s, an agreement was finally reached. There were rumors that Julian got $20 million. The security and stability it provided were welcome, but they couldn't take away the anguish of having to struggle for what he always believed rightfully belonged to him. Though the formal agreement granted him freedom, it failed to alleviate his psychological turmoil. No amount of money could ever make up for the years spent apart, the forgotten moments, or the memories lost. In the shadow of Lennon, brothers Julian and Sean Lennon have developed a deep and true friendship despite their disparate childhood experiences and recollections of John Lennon. Distancing, grief, and mutual understanding shaped their relationship, which was not always close when they were kids. Being the sons of a renowned person meant they had to work on developing this bond. It wasn't something that happened automatically. When Julian was a little boy, his father abandoned him, and it made for a difficult childhood. From a young age, he could only observe John Lennon distantly, through news reports, television, and anecdotes shared by others. Even if he wished he could feel his father's presence, he couldn't. On the other hand, Julian felt lonely because Yoko Ono and Sean were constantly with John. Julian may have grown bitter as a result of the long-lasting hurt he felt because of this disparity. As Sean was growing up, things were different. A lot of love, his father's presence, and the reassuring idea of John Lennon's existence characterized his boyhood. Sean, in contrast to Julian, experienced family affection and closeness. Nevertheless, everything shifted in December 1980 at the unexpected death of his father. There was an unfathomable hole that this loss created in Sean's life. There were striking differences between Sean and Julian. One was used to maintaining a safe distance, while the other thrived at close quarters. Both experienced the anguish of longing and the shock of sudden loss. They came to a special kind of understanding despite the fact that their differences could have kept them apart forever. They all understand, in their own ways, what it was like to live beneath the suffocating shadow of Lennon's name. They were both burdened by the public's fixation on their family, the onslaught of comparisons, and the difficulty of leaving a legacy they had no choice but to carry. Their shared struggles eventually bonded them. They didn't grow close over shared childhood memories. Therefore, it's safe to say that's where their friendship originated. On the contrary, it sprang from the mutual understanding that they were both burdened by things that the majority of people couldn't fathom. An important event occurred in 2006. In Paris, Julian attended one of Sean's performances. Something about seeing his younger brother perform for the first time moved him. The impact of Sean's stage presence went beyond their father's influence, as Julian witnessed firsthand. He could also see that Sean had talent. Their bond was strengthened by this ordeal. In 2007, while Sean was on tour, Julian made sure to spend extra time with him. Their time together was simple, yet meaningful. After being apart for so long, it helped heal some of the wounds. Slowly but surely, times of closeness, delight, and mutual respect supplanted the earlier separation. In time, Julian developed feelings of pride and protectiveness toward his sibling. He spoke lovingly of Sean on a regular basis, and his decision to keep his relationship with Yoko Ono amicable was motivated by his respect for his younger brother. Harming Sean would be unbearable for Julian. Julian and Sean sat side by side in 2021 at a London screening of the Beatles' Get Back documentary, when they witnessed rare video of their father, John Lennon, in the studio. They witnessed a more carefree, hilarious, and brilliantly inventive John Lennon in his youth. For Julian, This was a life-changing experience since it rekindled a vision of his father that he had long since lost. A thawing of his animosity toward his father occurred, and was supplanted by a kinder kind of affection throughout those hours. The fact that Julian was able to share this with Sean elevated its significance. Both brothers honor their father in unique ways today. Continuing in his father's creative footsteps, Julian uses music, photography, and narrative as means of self-expression. John Lennon's artistic endeavors and music library are overseen in part by Sean, who operates behind the scenes, for the purpose of making sure his father's name is known all across the world. Being connected with the Lennon name continues to be a problem, but they have managed to carry it gracefully. It used to be something that separated them, but now it's something that brings them closer together. Despite everything that has happened to him, Julian has always been a strong person. His emotional wounds from dealing with traumatic events from childhood persist to this day. Despite everything that has happened to him, he has managed to find some peace and happiness. His close bond with his brother Sean is a major source of this. Sadness and resilience have been part of Sean's journey. He knows what it's like to be constantly compared to someone else, even though his childhood was different from Julian's. Because of their common history, the brothers have become close. What has already transpired cannot be altered. Instead of animosity and discord, they have constructed a present brimming with affection and reverence. Solitary voyage that goes beyond the Fab Four. Lots of people assume that the Beatles' offspring are Beatles experts. Fans all throughout the globe are captivated by the Fab Four's narrative because of the revolutionary impact they had on the music industry. Nevertheless, Julian Lennon, the first son of John Lennon, has shown that this isn't always the case. When it comes to hearing band news, he actually feels left out a lot. Today, Julian discussed his life and career with a British publication. Although Julian is widely recognized as the son of John Lennon, he has forged his own path apart from his illustrious father's band. The interview also discussed Julian's upcoming ventures and his thoughts on being linked to a legendary name. In the course of the interview, Julian waxed poetic about his newfound passion for photography. Julian views photography as a means to achieve inner calm, create something lasting, and establish his identity apart from his father's fame. His most recent project is a book titled Life's Fragile Moments, which aims to demonstrate his distinct viewpoint on the world through the capture of fleeting moments that others might overlook. New music is not Julian's current priority, as he recently stated. Not long ago, he made an effort to return to the music industry, even going so far as to prepare for television appearances. But things did not pan out the way he had hoped, and he was devastated and disappointed. He decided to take a break after this. In a world where he is incessantly compared to John Lennon, his father, he chose to focus on painting since it gives him independence rather than pursue music. According to Julian, being known as the son of John Lennon has defined his entire life. People can't stop bringing up his famous father no matter where he goes. It has been difficult at times, and he has felt trapped by it. The need to find his own identity, though, became clear to him. He aspired to make art that could be appreciated for what it was rather than for what it was about him. That's why he doesn't care about other people's opinions of him. He works tirelessly to establish his own worth. He made it clear that he wasn't trying to draw attention to himself or boast. He had to believe in himself more than anything else. Julian proves to himself that he is capable through creating art, whether it's music or photography. He isn't interested in debating the opinions of others, even if they do exist. He places a premium on knowing that his work will make a difference. Suddenly, everyone was talking about the Beatles. There has been a resurgence of interest in the band in recent years, as if to bring back fond memories of their greatness. Their music has reached a newer generation that was not around during the original impact thanks to documentaries and modernized cinema. Fans were treated to a fresh perspective on the band's creative process in Peter Jackson's 2021 documentary, Get Back. David Tedeschi and Martin Scorsese paid tribute to the band in their heyday with 2024's Beatles 64. A long-forgotten historical event has received fresh attention thanks to the restoration of Let It Be, a film by Michael Lindsay Hogg from 1970. These ventures, in Julian's view, prove that the Beatles are still very much in demand today. Their tale lives on, not only in literature, but also in the memories of those who come after them. Regardless, there are moments when he feels left out, like he is only a spectator to the band's lasting impact. Despite this, he doesn't seem to be bitter about his situation. Yoko Ono and Julian Lennon's silent truce after John Lennon's untimely death, Julian carried a huge burden that never lifted. This burden was brought on by his feelings for Yoko Ono, the lady who entered his father's life and changed his family's trajectory irrevocably. Just being his dad's second wife wasn't enough for Julian. The terrible turning point when his father chose to go his own way and abandon his mother, Cynthia, was symbolized by her. Instead of viewing her as a stepmother, Julian felt her presence as an ever-present embodiment of his pain. She represented all the things that had troubled his youth. The bitterness lingered for a long time. On the contrary, it grew stronger with time. There was a practical side to the bitterness as well as an emotional one. Legal disputes over John's father's estate lasted for a long time after his death. Every legal document, discussion, and decision served as a constant reminder to Julian that Yoko was in power, while he, as the son, had very little say. Those persistent reminders deepened his mistrust for nearly 20 years. Truthfulness was paramount to Julian, and he admitted that he struggled to view Yoko as anything other than an adversary. He had trouble trusting her since he thought she controlled his feelings for his father and his belongings. There was an undeniable air of tension whenever the family was seen in public. Things involving the Lennon moniker frequently appeared scripted. There was no real connection between them, despite the courteous greets, nods, and grins they shared. Julian and Yoko kept their distance, their connection distant and distant. Their considerable separation was obvious to onlookers. Their mutual silence revealed a great deal about their past. But as time goes on, life has a way of softening even the hardest circumstances. In spite of my resentment, there were instances when I felt a little less rage due to unforeseen events. Timeless, an exhibition of Julian's photography, opened in September 2010. Julian had a strong sense of pride in the event since it gave the world a glimpse of his efforts. The unique mix of people it gathered was its defining feature. It was a historic event since it brought together John Lennon fans from all across his life. John's ex-girlfriend Cynthia, Julian's mother, was there. Also present was Sean, his younger half-brother, whom he held in high regard. Also in attendance was May Pang, with whom John had a strong friendship. Also present was Yoko, someone Julian had been cautious of. What happened that night was anybody's guess. Arguing, disagreeing, or rehashing old grudges is something some people may be looking forward to. Surprisingly, though, none of those bad things happened. On the contrary, the evening was spent amicably, with amiable conversations and even a few embraces. There may not have been an emotional reunion or dramatic reconciliation, but there was peace. The fact that everyone could be together peacefully gave Julian hope that even a tenuous peace was possible. Julian began to see things differently with the passage of time. This was not due to any forgiveness on his part, but rather to the genuine and loving bond he had always shared with his half-brother, Sean. Julian hoped to keep their friendship alive. Gradually, he realized that harboring animosity towards Yoko would also hurt Sean. Even hurting Sean's mother would have a detrimental impact on his sibling. Julian resolved to stop fighting because he did not want their history to impact his love for Sean. He decided not to allow his resentment harm their relationship and to let go of unwinnable grudges. Peace was prioritized over perpetual bickering, and although this decision did not erase the past or repair past hurts, it did bring about a ceasefire. Julian admitted that he altered his tune after realizing that harming Sean's mother would have a negative impact on Sean as well. His future interactions with Yoko were shaped by this knowledge. When it came to settling disagreements, he did not see her as a friend or an equal. He loved his brother more than anything, so he accepted her as someone he could put up with. A profound and intricate bond remains between Julian and Yoko. Their experiences in the past, such as family strife, traumatic recollections, and legal disputes, have an effect on it. Despite everything, they came to the realization that there are other paths to peace than total forgiveness. Holding back and deciding not to bring up previous hurts can sometimes bring about serenity. Not even Julian could alter the past. When his parents divorced, he endured years of emotional distance and a plethora of legal battles. He would never be able to separate those experiences from his life narrative. But Julian adjusted to his new reality. Apart from allowing it to dictate his every action, he took a strong but straightforward choice to safeguard his relationship with Sean, even if it required him to set aside the intense hatred he had earlier felt. Though it lacks audacity and triumph, this peace is tender, delicate, and cautious. That being said, it is real. It is not big acts of forgiveness that build it, but rather little acts of acceptance, within settings conducive to joy, and by realizing that embracing love for one person can alleviate resentment against another. Have you any thoughts on the story of Julian Lennon? Let us know what you think by leaving a comment. Get more interesting stories like this by subscribing, like, and pressing the bell icon.